Thank you, Matt. Robert.
Thank you, and welcome to Birmingham, and you join us in this great city on the first anniversary of two Section 114 notices and a Section 5 notice being issued against the Labour administration. The first Section 114 notice was really clear about the reasons for Birmingham's bankruptcy. It was a failure to deliver savings. The council had missed 54% of its savings in 21-22, over 80% of its savings in 22-23. They had an equal pay liability, originally quoted at 760 million, that's now risen to 867 million. And they had an Oracle system that was rolled out. It was meant to cost 90 million, that was what was in the budget. It's currently costing 140 million, and they still haven't got a final bill because we're a year and a half away from it finally being implemented correctly. The second Section 114 notice, you might think, is even more astonishing, because it was issued for a failure of the administration to agree to act on the equal pay liability to get a grip of the financial situation in Birmingham, hence why the Section 5 notice also got issued. And the impact that's had on Brummies across our city is, as well as now having commissioners in the city, spend control boards, discretionary spending's been stopped obviously, there's increased borrowing, increased asset sales, there's been drastic cuts to services as well, because one of the things Labour are really good at when they get a financial mess in the council is not actually making the tough choices to restructure how you run a council, but instead just to do the salami slicing on the frontline services that residents actually really value. And of course the final impact on Brummies has been a 21% council tax rise over the last 2 years, and I have no doubt if they get the discretion of a cap being removed, they will be facing far higher council tax rises in the years ahead. The other thing that's come out from this whole process is just the massive financial messes that's been made. So as well as the mismanagement of IT contracts like the Oracle rollout and the mismanagement of employment contracts like equal pay issues, they built an athletes village for the Commonwealth Games in 2022. It was a brilliant success to the Commonwealth Games. That was run by Andy Street and the government. The only bit the council was in charge of was the athletes village. It never housed a single athlete. It's still not finished here in 2024. And they've just sold it at a massive loss that has left the council with a debt which will cost repayments of 18 million a year for the next 40 years. So that is a massive failure on a grand scale from an organisation that's let down its local residents. And it's not even the end of the mistakes, because just this last month the cabinet had to admit that the CCTV control centre they originally planned for 2.9 million is coming in at 5.5 million. Massively over budget again, no lessons learned from the failed IT rollout on Oracle. So the impact on Brummies is a double whammy of higher taxes for fewer services. But just to tie it back to what the question we're being asked is can well-run councils lead the Conservatives to victory? What we saw this year in elections in Birmingham was actually Andy Street was the mayor of the West Midlands for the election, very sadly lost by 1,500 across an electorate of 2.4 million. Had a swing to him in Birmingham compared to the last mayoral election. It's the only region in the West Midlands where actually Andy's position improved. We saw Andrew Mitchell holding on in Sutton Coldfield, where the Conservatives were forecast to lose on all the election predictors, and we've seen a swing to us in every single council by-election there's been this year. So that what the party needs to learn is where there's badly run Labour councils and where there's well-run Conservative councils, we need to be using those examples far more nationally to show the electorate that where Labour get in, they destroy the finances, and where Conservatives get in, they deliver value for money and good quality services.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert, for that very...
Yeah, thank you. I mean, Matt earlier in his comments talked about a responsible way of running a budget, which was you look at how much money you've got and then you work out how you get your budget to fit that. We need to not fall into the trap of what Labour have done for the last decade, which is to say the amount of money they wish they had and then try and set a budget for that amount. And so, yes, we absolutely need to look at local government finance. Kevin and his team at the LGA do a great job lobbying on behalf of Conservative councils. But actually it would be a mistake for the National Party 5 years away from a general election to try and rip up local government finance, because we're not in control anymore. We shouldn't keep acting like we're the government. We're not. There's a role for the Taxpayers Alliance over the next couple of years to lead that work and have think tanks do that work, so that the government in waiting, as we'll hopefully call them in 5 years' time, actually can prepare. But it would be wrong now, 5 years before a general election, to come out and say this is a wholesale change we've made, because I'm telling you, whatever the change is won't be popular.
Any more questions?
Well, like with everything, they don't get it all right in Manchester. Look, it's easy to say when you look at numbers, raw figures, that large metropolitan areas, deprived communities had larger budget cuts. But actually, when you look at the figures, Birmingham Labour had a great wheeze over the last decade. They took the council's budget in 2012, they added everything they wanted to do. They added an imaginary inflationary figure and then claimed that money had been cut from their budget because it wasn't given to them, despite the fact it was actually nothing that was ever given to them, it was just what they wanted to have. So you can't always believe the figures that Labour politicians have stood up and said. I mean, I wonder how many of you in the room know what Birmingham's budget is currently. I'm guessing no one. Sorry? No, it's 4.3 billion gross spend. You're not telling me that you can't save money from a 4.3 billion gross spend budget. And that's the problem. It's very easy to sit and ask for more money. It is much harder to sit there and actually decide you don't know best, let's share some services with neighbouring councils. To say that you don't know best, let's actually move the workforce to having a more agile workforce. To do what other small councils have been able to do, but Birmingham doesn't, through generating energy by solar panels on roofs, insulation on buildings to lower energy and heating costs, to cut down on procurement. In the year that the council got a Section 114 notice, they spent 30 million on consultants into a council when they knew they had no money. When the council knew they had financial pressures, they decided to spend £500,000 by pausing works that were happening at Victoria Square so they could put on an event for 10 days, knowing that that would cost them £500,000 in compensation. And then they took 3 years to admit that they owed £500,000 to a company and they just hadn't bothered telling it. Money can be saved from large metropolitan budgets. And one thing actually Manchester Council have done quite well is they actually have always managed to balance their budget. What went wrong in Birmingham was they talked about the budget they wanted and not worked to the budget they had.
I'll take.
Yeah, thank you. Just to wrap through a couple of quick answers. So on advice for the leader, I'd say improve support from the central office. I'd also say actually learn from what David Cameron did as leader of the opposition. He was really good at highlighting well-run Conservative councils, good initiatives they've done. That's what we need to be doing. But I'd also have some advice for any candidate next year. Don't wait for anyone else to win you your seat. You've got 6-7 months from now to the election. Spend every single day you can out campaigning, working for your community. That is your best chance of winning elections next year. Don't rely on anyone else. On the unitary debate, it's not for me to tell counties and districts how to format. It's for each area to decide how they want to be governed, frankly. I believe it's localism. And then on just adult and children's services, whatever the budget the council has, there are people at the basis of this. It's about getting the basics right, because the basics don't cost more than the budget you have in your council. The basics, if you look at a place like Birmingham, it was not failing to do DBS checks. Birmingham didn't do DBS checks on the drivers of children home to school transport. It's not failing to deliver kids to the wrong school. Birmingham delivered kids to the wrong school. They delivered children who didn't have the ability to communicate to schools where no one knew who the child was. The child couldn't tell the school, and the school didn't know the school was meant to have the child where the child had been dropped. Those are basics, and it's not a budget issue, it's a failure of management issue.
And Dan, one word answer.